Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to help you finish your Christmas shopping list and let everyone else over there stiff-arm their competition while trying to fight off that tryptophan on Turkey Night. Now, what we did was we partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get up to 75% off over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles during this holiday season. They have something for everyone. But how is RSA able to offer such great deals on JSA authentication, you ask? Well, they do this by making deals directly with athletes so there are no extra markups, and they choose to then pass that savings on to you, the customer. Now, all orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. But hurry up because customers are so stark raving mad for RSA that memorabilia sells out daily. All you have to do is head over to shoprsa.com/SHN. Again, that's shoprsa.com/SHN. So don't wait to bring home your favorites and own a piece of sports history for you and the loved ones on your shopping list this holiday season.
We have another great visit from Tomothy Brown of Football Archaeology as he discusses some of the early roots of the NFL Combine, an organization called LESTO, and the AFL Redshirt Draft. Tim's got the scoop coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pigpen, your portal to positive football history. And it is Tuesday, and once again, we have a friendly visit from our friend Tomothy Brown of Football Archaeology. Tim, welcome back to the Pigpen.
What's your name again? Darren?
Yeah. Oh no, we're having.
Yeah, okay.
I think. Did you play a couple games without the helmet on, Tim?
Yeah, more than a few.
More than a few. Okay. All right.
Hey, good to be back as always.
All right. Well, let's get to the topic at hand then. One of your tidbits really caught my eye from mid-October. And it was on the American Football League from the 1960s. As a matter of fact, the 1965 AFL Redshirt Draft. And you talked about a couple things, and one of them was the LESTO organization as well. And I'd like to see if maybe you could have some discussion on that tonight.
Yeah. So, this is one of those where I think in order to kind of set up the 65 Redshirt Draft in the AFL, there's just a whole lot of history behind that, right? So I'm gonna double back, decades or so.
Okay.
And so, so part of this is just like I'm always scouring eBay and some other places for score postcards, images, books related to football history, but I'm not necessarily looking for like this great item. I'm mostly looking for some kind of item that provides some context, some information, or an image that tells me something about football at a different time. And so one of the great sources is the Spalding's football guides, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've got like boatloads of those, both PDF versions that are out of copyright, so you can get them for free, and then the NCAA offers free ones from 2000 on. So I've got those, and then I buy the books, in between. And so I never spend much money on it. I buy them. And so recently I was able to buy this 1965 AFL guide, similar to the old Spalding kind of guides. So I bought it really not knowing what was going to be inside that thing. And so when I received it, I said 1965, but it was a 1967 guide but it had information about the 65 draft. And anyway, so I'm, leafing through the thing, and here it says 1965 Redshirt Draft, which at that point I had never heard of before. Now, familiar with the NFL having a futures draft, and I understood what that was all about, but I hadn't heard the redshirt version. So, what the AFL did was, and even, going back even the NFL, back in 1925, the Bears signed Red Grange right after his season. So the day after he completed his last game at Illinois, he was playing for the Bears. And that violated the norms of the time. And so, created all kinds of turmoil. So the NFL agreed, we're not going to draft we're not going to sign anybody until until their class has graduated, right? So you get to sign them their senior season. And so everything was fine until like 6, when all of a sudden what we now think of as the redshirt process came into being. So a college player could delay for a year his playing, and get 4, basically be in college for 5 years, but play in 4, which then changed the dynamic of your signing, your original class versus your graduating class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything, nobody paid attention to it until like in early 60s, I think it was, maybe it was late 50s. NFL teams started signing what they called a futures contract. So a guy who redshirted, they would draft him in a normal draft order, just a normal draft. They'd sign him, or they'd draft him and basically stake a claim to a guy like Donnie Anderson or some top-notch junior who they knew they wouldn't be able to sign for another year because he was going to keep playing. He had another year of eligibility left. The AFL, on the other hand, what they ended up doing was they said, instead of just having it integrated with the normal draft, we're going to have a separate redshirt draft. So they drafted their normal guys, and then they had a separate draft of redshirts, right? They could basically stake their claim to these players. But the other, two other cool things about it was just, one was that they, at the time in 65, the draft occurred on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Now it's like April 23rd or some crazy date. But
it gets later every year, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be in December pretty soon.
Right.
But back then it was like neither the NFL nor the AFL, because they were still rival leagues, wanted the other one to get ahead of each other. So they held it on the same day, right after the college season ended, so that, if they had the chance to sign somebody the next day, they did it. So anyway, it was just one of those things we just don't even, it's even part of our thinking anymore. But with two rival leagues at the time who both had money, it was a big deal. So anyways, it's in this list, just, had a bunch of guys, most of them, I have no idea who they were. Maybe in 1966, I would have recognized their names, but not anymore. But there were still, there were a handful of really pretty top-notch guys. Which I guess brings me to this whole LESTO issue, right? So, until about that time, each team scouted independently. So they'd each send their guys out, and some of them didn't do much scouting at all, and they were terrible at it. And others, they were pretty proficient at it. So send their guys out to the colleges, measure them, weigh them, time them, all that kind of stuff. And a couple of teams, the Lions, Eagles, and Bears, so Lions, Eagles, and Steelers. Was LESTO. So, they combined their scouting resources, or part of their scouting resources. So that's where we get the word combine. They combined their early scouting resources, and it became more like those were the guys who went out and did all the preliminary work to evaluate who should even be considered. And then the serious examination of who's who, that came more, that was left to more higher end scouts within each individual team. And then, there were other combines came together, and eventually they all joined into the one combine, which we now know today, right? But so yeah, that's kind of the origins of, so that this futures draft kind of existed around the same time as the combine got started.
So all that, and it turned into the underwear Olympics. That's commonly what they call it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. I've written about this elsewhere, but there was, there's been times like the Redskins, I think it was, they drafted the same guy 2 years in a row. He was a USC or Cal player, a guy named Russo. But a lot of these teams, they would just draft guys based off of what they read in the newspaper, or like, not the Street and Smiths, but some version of that of their time. And they drafted this guy, and he was a junior, so he wasn't eligible for the draft. But they used a first-round draft pick on the guy. So then they draft him the next year, and he says, "I don't want to play NFL. I'm joining the Navy." I mean, it's just the level of scouting and insight. I mean, so much of it was just based on, hey, I've got this buddy who's a coach out at Pacific Lutheran or at Texas A&M, or whatever school, and he says this kid's a player. So you trusted that, rather than like on-site physical evaluations. And, then you had Paul Brown bringing the 40-yard dash, and, to really more technical evaluations and cone drills and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's a different world.
Yeah, it's interesting when they publish some of the like the radial charts that they have on these guys, where they have radial charts, sort of a round chart, and the points go out in different directions, almost like a clock, and you see where these guys are rating on it. And it's really kind of a unique monitoring and calibrating system to try to judge a player's proficiency. It's a kind of a cool thing. So
yeah, well, and one thing I commented on in the little article about the redshirt draft is that the heaviest player in the redshirt draft was 270 pounds.
Jeez.
And that's just kind of unimaginable today. Because that 270 isn't going to get you very far on a defensive line, or especially an offensive line. But back then, that was a huge man, because very few teams did any lifting at all, right?
Yeah.
So
it's amazing. We were just talking, Oz Davis, who's a fellow podcaster. We were doing a program on the 1924 game with the University of Chicago and with Illinois, and how Chicago was going to defend Red Grange. And Amos Alonzo Staggs said he was going to put two of his biggest guys at him. And one guy was 199 pounds, and the other guy was like 204 pounds. And that was how they were going to stop Grange. It's just amazing how, mankind has sort of grown, and through nutrition and exercise and, genetics, and the size people we have playing football today. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it is also just kind of a selection process, and the different techniques. If you when teams played, when you played single platoon, there's no way you could have 300-pound people. I mean, half the guys in the NFL could not survive in that game, because they're too big, they're too heavy, they're not in shape. And so, I mean, even like you look at international rugby players, top end athletes, and the biggest guys huge guys in that sport are 270, and but they look more like tight end, D end, sort of guys, not like offensive tackles, right? Because they got to run the whole game.
Right.
So, but anyways, so, I mean, it's, to take nothing away from the athleticism of an NFL offensive tackle, but it's a selection process that it's enabled by the rules that are in place today, not the rules that were in place in the 1940s or 20s or whatever.
Well, definitely some fascinating stuff, and we really appreciate you digging into that. It's a little bit more modern than what we've talked to you about before, being in the 60s. But you sit back and think about how long ago the 60s was. It's kind of shocking to me, but a time period that I was alive in, but don't remember much, but I was alive then. Tim, why don't you, while we're talking about your tidbits, why don't you give us, the listeners, an idea how they can enjoy your tidbits on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I mean, real simple. If you're interested in listening, so obviously, if interested in listening, then subscribe to this podcast. If you're interested in reading, then I'm at footballarchaeology.com. You can find me there. It's a Substack, application, and you can, at least for now, find me on Twitter. We'll see what happens in the long term with her. But anyways, for now, I'm on Twitter, but under the same name, Football Archaeology. And so however you prefer to consume, have at it.
All right. Tim Brown, Football Archaeology. Folks, we have that information on the show notes of this podcast. So if you can't get to a pencil and write it down right now, it's not convenient, don't worry. Come back and check out the show notes, or go to pigskindispatch.com or footballarchaeology.com, and you'll find out how to join that. Tim Brown, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Hey, thank you again, Darren. Thank you.
The Rose Bowl. The game that inspired the college football bowl season has a long and storied history. The stadium itself is 100 years old, and in celebration of it, Pigskin Dispatch is assembling some of the top historians and authors to share the memories, people, and events that make the granddaddy of them all the special game that it is.
That's right. Join me, Darren Hayes, on the Pigskin Dispatch podcast here on Sports History Network, or your favorite podcast provider, from the end of November all the way to the day of the big game.
Rose Bowl history from pigskindispatch.com.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff, for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. that message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.